Hello there all, and welcome back to this third part of the series, where we'll be looking at the 7201. The fourth out of the 5 Clan Wars tanks, reward tanks, I will be looking at, and we will be comparing it to the obvious counterpart, the E100, being as the VK72.01 is very much an exact side grade to this tank. Not only do they share the same main gun, a lot of the stats on these two vehicles are near identical, with the only major differences being the armor model, which in some areas I think it is much better on the VK72.01, but we will go into that in further detail in Tanks GG and the trading battle that we will look at immediately after this. Though I must stress one thing. The stats on the 7201 may change. It's not set in stone, it's been more rumour at this point than anything, but it is something I wanted to denote. So, what we will be doing is looking at the stats as they reflect in the game right now, and in the stats on the 9.17 server. Though I'd imagine by the time this video comes out, 9.17 will be implemented, and the stats should withhold for that as well. So, on that note, let's go ahead right in and take a look at just how the 7201 shows up against the E100 in Tanks GG. Righto. As I'd mentioned, we've got the 7201 comparing it to the E100, obviously with the 150mm gun, since this is what the 7201 uses, so it just makes sense to have that as the comparison with the E100 using it as well. And first up, with this gun, you will notice that the VK7201 has a notably worse DPM. The reload, for example, this is the base reload, so obviously if you're running a gun rammer, and actually for the sake of this video, let's go ahead and do that, so it better reflects what the reload and DPM is on this thing, what you can expect out of it. Now most people I'd imagine will be using a gun lane drive and a vert stam, so vents may make a little bit of a change on this, but we're just going to be looking at the gun rammer. So the exact reload is going to be nearly or actually better yet, more than a second and a half longer than the E100. But you're already rocking close to a 20-second reload. It can be a bit painful, and there are two reasons for this. One we'll look at towards the tail end of the stats here, but the DPM's fairly bad on the 7201. A lot of people would discount the tank outright because of this, but bear with me. I really like this tank, and without putting in too much bias, I want to show you why there are other characteristics of the 7201 which, in my eyes, mitigate some of that poor DPM when compared to the E100, which is already somewhat low DPM. But going back, you have very good alpha at 750, so with these two tanks, you have a lot of HP, so that DPM is warranted, because you've got much more HP and the ability to block shots, of which 7201 in some places is better than the E100 at this, which is why I feel that the lower DPM isn't nearly as bad a thing as it seems. It's still bad, it's a bit of a drawback, but again, let's look at more of these statistics so you can see why I think it's justified. Now, the aim time, 3.26, it's worse than the 100. They're both rather bad, and if you'd noticed in my garage, I run a gun lane drive and a vert stam on the 7201, and because you shave that aim time down just a bit, you're not going to be snapshotting, but unlike the E100, once we look at the turret timer, you will see why it's less of an issue with our 7201 here versus Mr. E100. Accuracy, exact same as the 100. 0.38 is... it's not bad. It's better than a Russian 122mm. But it's not exactly the most accurate thing it ranges. But let's face facts. You're probably going to be brawling in these two vehicles as it is, which 0.38 accuracy is fine in these instances. The dispersion is a touch worse than the E100, 10% worse actually, so take that as you will. I personally think it's still just enough. If you're brawling, it's perfectly acceptable. If you're sniping at something quick on the move, you're not really going to be snapshotting, but that's not exactly something you're going to be doing rather often with these things, or if you are, then that's a problem. Now, gun depression, 7 degrees. This is where I'm rather comfortable with it. I think 7 and 8 degrees gun depression, as I stated in the M60 video, the one immediately prior to this, that 7 and 8 is good, 9 and 10 is excellent. There are a lot of times to where with this tank versus, say, a Russian Med and... or anything with comparable at 5 degrees gun depression, there are lots of times you have to expose your hull. With the 7201 and the 100, the 7 degrees is just enough to where a lot of terrain you can make use of without having to stick out your lower glacis or even the majority of the hull. Which is very nice, considering you've got exceptional turret armor on the 7201 and the E100 to a lesser extent. Now, here at the movement, and this is why I also wanted to show the training battle, which we will be looking at after this, the top speed on the 7201 is a tad misleading. The E100 on paper is much slower than the 7201, but they both share a very similar power to weight ratio. Now, what does this mean? It means on flat surfaces, especially in short and medium distances, the 7201 is going to be no quicker than the E100. But if you're on a slight decline, or if you're, well, going downhill outright, the 7201 is going to be a much quicker vehicle than the E100. But from my experience, these opportunities are very limited, and they've really only come into play during, and not that I'm advocating this, running a 7201 in Clan Wars, but if you're banking a strap around taking a tank very quickly downhill, oh dad, you're probably not taking a 7201, it's going to be an IS-7 or something to that extent. Now, turret traverse is very similar. It's once again 10% worse. In this case on the 7201, it's not enough to really be a problem. They're both relatively slow, and you're going to have to be making use of the hull and the turret. And this is where it evens out. You've got your hull traverse, which is 2 degrees per second, better than the E100. So with your hull moving and your turret moving, they are literally the same. As far as something's flanking you, you move the hole in the turret, the gun is going to stay on target at the same exact pace. Now, going into the hull armor. As I've said with the last two videos, these numbers are very deceptive. Exceptionally so. I should say exceedingly so. Wrong word. But 200 on the face of the 7201, and it's 250 on the E100. Well, that's nice, but the E100, it's rather flat. So this 200 on the 7201 ends up being much more effective. And then same when you look at this 160 on the sides, well, the E100 has 2 layers of spaced armor on it. And if you're being shot with heat, it's going to be an utter bear to pen an E100, and not as much on the 7201, but that's only if you're flat on, which is why we will go over this in great lengths in the armor model as well as in the trading room. Now HP, here's another little bit of a discrepancy. You've got 200 less on the 7201. Already, if you're playing a tank that needs to rely on its alpha and has a bad reload, you really want all the hit points you can get, so you end up making better trades proportionally. But with my time with the 7201, I've never felt that having 200 less hit points on it has truly hurt the vehicle. Now let's continue. We've got similar view ranges, 400 on each. It's good. Heavy tank, though it may as well be 0 on the camo coefficient. I've said it twice already, but it is wonky on Takes GG right now. You cannot see the appropriate camo coefficient for a lot of vehicles. If I remember, it's under 5%. I'm fairly certain it's 1.5 or 3% for stationary camo coefficient on these. So no, they're not very stealthy at all. I mean, they're big box tanks. Why would they be? And then we've got the fire chance. This is tethered to the engine, and I do believe the 7201's the same as the 100 in that the transmission is in the front and the engine is much closer to the center of the tank. So with all the times I've run these, I do not believe I've outwardly caught a light. If it ever was, it was from a central hit or a penetrating hit on the deck from artillery. But out of my recollection, they do not catch a light any more than, well, any other heavy tank that you run. Well, with the exception of the E5, because you pop in the jack seat with that thing, you're probably going to catch on fire. But that's another thing altogether. Now, what I wanted to look at and stress to all of you is the armor model. For this, we'll be looking at the hybrid because I think it gives you a better feel aesthetically of where shots will need to be placed, and we'll go ahead and we've already done it on the 100 even better. Now, if you remember, the face of the turret is 250mm thick. Now, this is good if someone's firing AP at you, but the E100, I would dare say 8 to 9 times out of 10, somebody's going to be loading up heat or APCR and penning you through the face of the turret, which forces you to highly angle it, so people are having to just bounce off after you fire your gun. You may even just poke out around the corner like this, then turn your turret accordingly, shoot, and then immediately turn it back to get that effective armor back. The 7201 does not have this issue. Only the very inside seam is thin. Everything else is exceedingly thick on this. And unless they shoot the very far back with APCR and get better normalization, they're probably not going to penetrate because it is nearly 60 degrees slope on it, with a very good base armor of 160mm. And then you've got around the gun, which is nigh impenetrable as well. The E100, it's just heat will go clean through this, and I will visually show you this in the trading room. And it's one of the reasons why I've been enjoying my 7201 much more than my E100, because it is an utter, I was about to say bitch, bear, well, I said it anyway, I don't know why I bothered redacting it, to pen the turret on this thing. Now there is one other thing. A lot of people would think you highly angle it like this, and one or two things is going to happen. They're going to aim at your lower laces, but unlike with the 100, it's got a mid-mounted turret, and when you're peeking it around the corner, all someone has to do is aim right here. They will go through that track and hit the inside of the hull armor. 7201, well, it doesn't have that issue at all, and it's got a rear-mounted turret, So you don't even really have to have this cog exposed, which they're not going to be putting anyway. So once again, I've had much more fun and a higher proportion of damage blocked with my 7201 than I have my E100. Now the only downside is, let's say someone catches your broadside and you're moving along, and let's face it, it's T10, there's a fair bit of heat being shot around most of the time. If someone auto-aims, they're going to be eating 2 sets of spaced armor. 7201, well, all they have to do is aim up top, and auto-aim is just slightly above centerline. And even if they hit the tracks, they may actually go through. Now, this is a minor downside, because if you got broadside anyway, either on the E100 they're going to be smart enough to just shoot the top of the turret, and on the 7201, you know, it's the same issue. They're probably going to be aiming here or there anyway, and in all reality, you're going to be doing your best to negate that by just rocking up in a corner, brawling and side scraping. So I just wanted to make you aware that the 72-1 has less spaced armor on the sides. Now it's more of a nicety, more so than an outright detriment on the part of the 72-1 compared to the E100. But let's get into those weak spots, because we've already pretty much talked about the E100, stating why I think the 72-1's a bit better, and some of the glaring weak spots whilst you're brawling and angling as you should with the E100. The 72-1, there is a huge problem, which very few pub matches I've ever run across people knowing how to pen this thing. If you're backed around the corner, and if you show any of the front plate, well, it's all well and good. People are going to be bouncing off the upper and lower because they're very well angled and very thick. All you have to do is aim at this center weld. It's completely flat. Unless you're in a moss shooting down at it, you may be bouncing with AP, but guess what? Any other vehicle relative same height to this thing, in nearly regardless of the angle, you can go through the center weld. But thankfully, because it's a rear-mounted turret, you don't have to expose that. You can just rock up and have a building that is right here, back out, and all people can shoot are your sides, tracks, turret, and there's a lot of it that they're going to have a hard time penning. Except for the very, very thin bit next to the sides of the gun, aside from the mantlet. Now, there is one other thing I want to note, but a lot of people probably will not be aiming at this, is the command hatch is surprisingly thick. Only the very base of it is pennable, but the thing is, since it's such a tall tank, all you can really see is the top bit. And you're either going to ricochet, or you're going to have 280 plus armor that you're trying to, you know, penetrate through, and you will not be able to. The E100 has another issue, which I will show in the video. All you have to do is just aim up and shoot the bar. If you've got an AP gun, and you're not firing heat and just going through the turret, just aim up here at the police bar. I believe a lot of people have coined it. And the 72-1 doesn't have that same issue. So overall, this tank has, in my eye, a much better armor model than the E100, which makes it bouncier, which, as I'd said, makes up somewhat for the less DPM than the E100S. Now, with all of this stated, we will now go into the training battle I had mentioned and see all of this in practice. So let's go ahead and transition over into that now. And here we are with the 72-1 on the left and the 100 on the right, with Bullet running shotgun for reasons you will see shortly. But first off, the hold reverse, which is 2 degrees better on the 72-1 than it is on the E100. That does not seem like much, but as is, well, plain viewable, it gets you around a fair bit quicker, which is nice, but to compensate, the turret does move slower. But as I'd said in TCG, they go at roughly the same speed, turning both at the same time. Now, we have a few mishaps here since, well, we're having to do this in chat, obviously, and I did not beat it on comms, which would have been incredibly fun for this video, but I'm more than grateful having him coming in to assist us putting out this footage on such short notice, so I can get this all out of you well before you have, well, before the window opens for people to select your Clan Wars tanks. And this is very much one of the 5 I wanted to put in a better light than it unfortunately is given. At any rate, on to the acceleration. If I've got this on normal speed. No, I do not. Forgive me. I've got the camera controls down. I just keep forgetting what these speeds are for the replays. It's been way too long since I've done these videos. There we go. Everything's down, fat and happy. Let's have a gander at how these accelerate. And if you remember, it's actually not even a 3% variance between the 72.01 and the 100. Now, we do have a top speed of 43, but as I'd stated, unless you're downhill, you're really not going to go quicker. That E100, despite having a 30 top speed, is going at the same pace we are. Oh jeez, I forgot we did this. Right, shenanigans over. I do believe we got a bit of time between where we get back into position. I would have just cut and pasted this, but I actually had a bit of an issue on YouTube when I was editing this before, because Adobe, I forgot what it was giving me a bit of a problem, hissy fit, whenever I would try and pass up 3 parts of one video. Now, we're going to have Bullet shoot us in the face of the turret, as he just did with the 100, which is, if you will remember, a problem I had stated. The E100, you have to have the gun obviously facing forward to hit the enemy. The flat face of your turret goes with that, obviously, and that's where you will be penned by premium ammo. Now, the 72.01 is quite the opposite. You keep your gun on the target, not just to shoot it, because that gives you the best armor profile. If you angle it off to the side as you would an E100, it's rather apt that that's where I put one of the decals, because that's the weak spot. You turn the turret, you're going to get penned. So, it's very nice that you can just back out of a corner, keep the center weld covered, and just aim your gun right on target, which I will be doing here once we look at the lowering laces penetration, having Bullet shoot at it with heat, which is, I believe, 320 to 340 mil penetration. Now, let's see. There we go. Now it's on the move off. This is when we show you with the gun down, and also show you that even though the lowering laces armor on the 72.01 is slightly better than the 100, you're still going to be penned. But going back on my original point, if you angle like this, you cover this part of the tank. So better yet, if you're, let's cover it with the side of the screen. If you're exposing this to the enemy, that's the best thing you could possibly be doing, because you're going to be covering the center weld. There we go. Now Bullet going through his lower plate. You've got your turret aimed at the enemy. You've got the thickest bits presented, and they're clearly going through the bottom plate. So even though it's good armor, with premium ammo you sort of go through, it's a bit of a given, not exactly negative to the tank, but you still want to try and cover it up as best you can. Now there is another weak spot which I'm going to have Bullet aim at shortly, which he may be aimed at the E100 at the cheek again, just to represent, even at an angle, he penned the cheek of that thing. Now, bullet is going to be aiming just underneath the side of the turret. The small triangular bit is the other weak spot, and he just hit there, but on the high side. If you're aiming at a 72.01, you can't hit the side of the turret at about this angle, or if you cannot hit the center weld, this small triangular bit. But underneath the base of the turret, this is where you want to shoot, because the further you get out, that time you completely whiffed, but no, the further you get out, sorry, you will bounce off. So hit the very inside. It's a bit tricky, and if you jazzing your tank back and forth, they're probably going to miss it. But this is truly why I enjoy my 72.01 more than the 100. From my experience, it has a much better armor model. Now let's go ahead and speed things up, because I think we've got Bullet here completely whiffing the police barrel on the 100, which is what I want to show next. The other strength of the VK72.01 is the command hatch. If BTED's gun would want to hit it, which apparently it just went straight out to the moon. Or in this case, I suppose that would be the sun, because it's not night time. But no, this is a taller tank, and he will ricochet off our command hatch. It has 280 to 320mm thick. It's incredibly good. And if they're below you, and for some dumb reason they're aiming at your command hatch, they're still going to bounce off. So overall, the 72.01 truly has a better armor model than the E100. And you also don't have the problem, which I should have had Bullet do. If you see the front of an E100, just aim in here. I know it seems odd. You'd think the track would fully eat it, but you will go clean through, hit the inside of the hull on the bottom, and you really only need about 260, 280 pen to go through, potentially track the tank and do damage. You cannot do that with a 72.01. So it's just so nice being able to back out of a corner, have your gun down like this, covering the left side of your tank, and having very little of your armor that the enemy can pen. Though one last thing I want to say, rambling on a bit long on this than I care to, but I just ever so love this thing. It may be because it's hated so much, who's to say? Maybe I'm just a complete and utter masochist. But the gun, yes. You need to have it aimed off just to the sides of this upper hull. Otherwise, you do not have the 9 degrees gun depression. I believe it goes down to 5 or 6. Which is even more reason you want to try and back out of corners, so that way you've got the gun all the way depressed and you're presenting the best profile possible. Now, having gone on my spiel long enough, I must admit I am a bit enamored with the tank. It's ugly, people hate it, but it is much better than others give it credit for. I do not want this to give you a jaded view on this as being your top selection for the Clan Wars vehicles. The 907 overall was still the most Clan Wars centric, and arguably the most fun all round. I love it as well, but I wanted to present the 72.01 in as best a format as I could. So, all that said, thank you all very much for watching. I hope you found this entertaining, if not informative, and I will catch you guys on the next video, where we will be looking at the WZ121B and doing a bit of a summation of all the Clan Wars vehicles, and possibly catching up on what all I've been doing and plan on doing. So until then, you all do take care. Catch you later.